Marcus Calloway had a system. He woke up at 4:47 every morning, not because an alarm told him to, but because his body had been trained for it. 13 years in the United States Army does that to a man. It rewires you. Even after the uniform comes off, the machine keeps running. So he'd rise before the sun, make 2 lunches, one with extra peanut butter because his son, Tyler, liked it that way, and one with the crust cut off because his daughter, Lily, refused to eat them otherwise, pack 2 backpacks, iron 2 sets of school clothes, and have breakfast on the table by 6:15. He never complained about any of it. Not once. He just did it. The way he'd done everything else in his life. Quietly. Completely without asking a single person for a single thing. Their mother, Dana, had left 8 months ago. Not for another man. Not for any dramatic reason. She just said she was tired. Tired of waiting for Marcus to come home from deployments. Tired of raising 2 kids alone. Tired of loving someone who came back from war a little less himself each time. She packed 2 suitcases on a Tuesday afternoon. Kissed Tyler and Lily on their foreheads. Told Marcus she still cared about him. And drove away in a white Honda that disappeared at the end of Fenwick Street before he could find the right words to say. He didn't blame her. He understood tired. He was tired too, but he had Tyler, who was 9 and obsessed with dinosaurs. And he had Lily, who was 7 and had her mother's laugh and her father's stubbornness. So Tired didn't get to win. Tired would have to wait its turn. Their house on Fenwick Street in Columbus, Ohio, was a modest beige 2-story with a crack in the driveway that Marcus kept meaning to fix but never got around to. The lawn was mowed on Saturdays. The trash was always out the night before pickup. From the outside, everything looked orderly. That was important to Marcus. He didn't want anyone looking at his house and seeing what was really happening inside it. What was happening inside it was this: a man barely holding the seams together with both hands. He worked at a logistics company downtown, managing inventory. A job that paid enough to keep the lights on and the refrigerator half full, but not enough to breathe easily at the end of each month. He'd turned down a promotion that came with travel requirements because Tyler had started having nightmares and needed someone in the house at night. He didn't tell his boss the reason. He just said no, thank you, and went back to his desk. He didn't tell anyone anything. The neighbor who lived directly across the street was a woman named Eleanor Marsh. She was 63 years old, recently retired from 32 years of teaching 4th grade, and she had lived on Fenwick Street longer than almost anyone else. She knew every crack in every sidewalk. She knew which families had dogs, and which ones had cats, and which ones had neither but still left food out for the stray, orange tabby that wandered the block. She had noticed Marcus Calloway from the beginning. Not in any suspicious way. Eleanor wasn't a nosy woman. She was an observant one. There's a difference. Nosy people look for things to report. Observant people look for things that need to be understood. And what Eleanor understood, after weeks of watching from behind her front curtain while watering her windowsill, herbs, was that the man across the street was drowning. Silently, politely, completely, but drowning. She saw him load 2 kids into a car in the dark every morning, still straightening his collar. She saw him drag himself up the driveway at 6 p.m. with grocery bags, cutting into both hands, balancing them against his chest to reach his keys. She saw him sitting on his front steps on Sunday evenings after the kids were in bed, not on his phone, not doing anything, just sitting, like a man who had nowhere left to run to. She also saw the moment he almost broke. It was a Thursday in November. Cold, gray, the kind of Columbus afternoon that reminds you winter doesn't apologize for arriving. She was pulling into her own driveway when she saw Marcus standing at his open trunk, staring into it, just staring. She couldn't see his face from that angle, but she could see his shoulders. And his shoulders said everything. They were caved inward in a way that shoulders aren't supposed to be, like something invisible was pressing down on them from above. He stood like that for nearly 2 full minutes before he reached into the trunk, picked up the grocery bags, and walked to his front door. Eleanor sat in her car long after he went inside. She had learned something. In 32 years of teaching children, the ones who never cried in class were the ones you needed to watch most carefully, not because they were troublemakers, because they were carrying things alone that no child should carry alone. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, what those children needed wasn't a question. They didn't need to be asked if they were okay, because asking gave them the chance to say yes, and they always said yes because they had practice saying it. What they needed was for someone to simply act, to step in without making it a conversation. She understood, sitting in her cold car on that November evening, that Marcus Calloway was one of those children, just grown and uniformless, and across the street from her instead of in a classroom. She thought carefully about what to do. She wasn't the type to organize a neighborhood, meal train. She knew instinctively that Marcus would shut something like that down. He'd smile, say he was fine, and be embarrassed for a week. She couldn't offer money. That would wound him. She couldn't offer pity because that wasn't what she had to give. What she had was something much more useful. She had time. She had steadiness. And she had 32 years of knowing exactly how to make someone feel like they were not a burden by making sure they never had to ask. She started simply. One Friday evening, she knocked on his door with a casserole dish. She didn't explain it as charity. She looked him dead in the eye and said, "I made a lasagna for my son who was supposed to visit this weekend, and he canceled on me last minute. I can't eat all of this, and I refuse to throw food away. Would you and your kids do me a favor and take it off my hands?" Marcus looked at her. He looked at the dish. He looked back at her. "Mrs. Marsh, it's Eleanor." "And I'm not asking you, Marcus. I'm telling you. Take the lasagna." He took the lasagna. The kids loved it. Lily ate 2 helpings and asked if the lady across the street was their grandma. Marcus had to look away when she said that. The following Tuesday, Eleanor knocked again. She had a box of books, picture books, chapter books, a set of dinosaur encyclopedias. She claimed she'd bought at a library sale for no particular reason. "My living room can't hold any more," she said. "I thought Tyler might want these." Tyler nearly knocked her over getting to the dinosaur books. After that, it became a quiet routine. Not intrusive, not scheduled. Eleanor would show up when she'd noticed something. When the kids had school picture day and Lily's hair needed braiding. When Marcus's truck was making a sound it shouldn't be making, and she'd already called her mechanic to take a look. When Tyler came home from school with a note about a science fair project and needed supplies he didn't have. Each time, Eleanor framed it as her own need, her own overflow, her own loose end that happened to land in his direction. She never once said the words, "I'm helping you." She never made it feel like rescue. She made it feel like neighborhood. Marcus knew. Of course he knew. He wasn't a foolish man. He just didn't know what to do with it. So he accepted it the only way he could, by accepting it, and by making sure his porch was shoveled all winter before she'd have to do her own, and by fixing the loose board on her front steps without being asked, and by having Tyler and Lily draw her a card on Christmas that she still has on her refrigerator to this day. 4 months passed like this. Then came the February morning everything cracked open. Tyler woke up with a fever of 103. Lily was crying because she couldn't find her left shoe. Marcus had a mandatory all-hands meeting at 8 a.m. that he couldn't. His supervisor had made it very clear attendance was non-negotiable, and the school had a strict policy about sick children. He stood in the middle of his kitchen at 7:09 in the morning, and for the first time in as long as he could remember, he didn't have a system. There was no protocol for this. He had run out of moves. He sat down at the kitchen table. He put his face in his hands. He didn't cry, but he came as close to it as he'd come since the hospital in Kandahar, 7 years ago when his sergeant told him the man next to him hadn't made it. He sat there in his quiet kitchen, with a sick child upstairs and a crying child somewhere, near the stairs, and a job that needed him in 45 minutes. And he felt, for the first time, truly felt, how completely alone he was. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Eleanor. "I'm up. I saw your lights on early. Everything okay over there?" He stared at the message for a long time. His thumbs hovered over the screen. Every instinct he had told him to say yes. "Fine, thanks for asking." Every wall he'd ever built told him to close the message and handle it himself. He typed, "Tyler's sick. I have a meeting I can't miss. I don't know what to do." He almost deleted it. He pressed send instead. 14 minutes later, Eleanor was at his door in her coat and slippers, a thermometer in her hand and a canvas bag over her shoulder with children's Tylenol, ginger ale, and a worn copy of Charlotte's Web. She walked past him into the house, went upstairs to Tyler's room, felt his forehead and told him in the calm, steady voice of someone who had handled 32 years of sick, children that he was going to be just fine and that she'd brought a story about a really extraordinary spider. Tyler smiled despite himself. She found Lily's shoe behind the couch. She always knew where shoes were. She had a gift. Marcus stood at the bottom of his stairs in his work shirt, watching this woman move through his house like she'd always known, where everything was. He watched her tuck Tyler in with the careful efficiency of someone who understood that love sometimes looks like precision. He watched her take Lily's hand and tell her that her hair looked beautiful today and mean it. He gripped the staircase railing. He didn't trust his voice, so he waited until Eleanor came back downstairs and stood in front of him. She adjusted her coat. She looked up at him in that direct, uncomplicated way she had. And before she could say anything, before she could frame this as a favor she needed from him, before she could soften it or wrap it in something easier to swallow, Marcus Calloway said, "Why?" Just that, just the one word. But she understood every single thing inside it. Eleanor looked at him for a moment. Then she said, quietly and without hesitation, "Because your kids deserve a village, and so do you. And I have been waiting 32 years for a reason to be somebody's village." He did cry then. He turned toward the wall so she wouldn't see it. But she saw it, and she said nothing. And that was exactly right. He got to his meeting on time. Tyler's fever broke by noon. Eleanor read him 4 chapters of Charlotte's Web and let him fall asleep with his hand on her arm. When Marcus came home that evening, she was in her own house. Lights on, the way she always was. He stood on his porch for a moment and looked across the street. Then he went inside and made 2 grilled cheese sandwiches and told his kids that sometimes the world sends you exactly the person you need exactly when you need them, and that when that happens, you don't let go. Lily asked if he meant Mrs. Eleanor. He said yes. Lily said she was going to make her a card. Tyler, still a little pale from the fever, looked up from his grilled cheese and said, "Dad, are we going to be okay?" Marcus looked at his son. He looked at his daughter. He thought about Eleanor across the street, and the lasagna and the dinosaur books, and the shoes behind the couch, and a text he almost didn't send. "Yeah, buddy," he said. And for the first time in a very long time, he meant it all the way down. "We're gonna be okay."